how much does culture really shape who you are? Your dreams, what you aim for, even how you think you should be? And can that culture, the one that feels like yours, sometimes, maybe subtly, hold you back? It's a big question, and it's right at the heart of what we're digging into today. Thomas Chatterton Williams' book, Losing My Cool.
Yeah, it's a really thought-provoking one. Williams, while he's a biracial American writer, a cultural critic, grew up in New Jersey, black father, white mother, and his background is quite academic philosophy at Georgetown, then cultural reporting at NYU. That really shapes his approach.
It absolutely does, and it leads him to this central argument, which is, well, pretty provocative. He basically argues that hip-hop culture, especially during that bling era, say roughly number 1990 to number 2010, it created this really narrow definition of what authentic blackness supposedly was. And he thinks that definition often worked against intellectual achievement, against, individual growth for young African Americans.
Right. He talks about this kind of false choice that he felt was presented. Like you either had to keep it real, which in his view often meant being anti-intellectual, materialistic, maybe aggressive, or you could pursue a different path, but that somehow made you less authentically black. He sees this as a real break from a much richer African-American history of learning and dignity.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The book itself, part memoir, part cultural critique, right? Came out in number 2010. And the timing is interesting, too. Obama presidency, hip-hop is totally mainstream by then. But it's looking back at that period, the rise of gangsta rap, the materialism, alongside some serious issues in urban communities, incarceration, education gaps.
Exactly. And what makes it so compelling, I think, is how he weaves his own story, his personal struggles, into that bigger cultural picture. We're going to try and break this down systematically, look at his claims, the evidence he uses, and then kind of view it through different analytical lenses to get a deeper understanding.
And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book critique. So Williams's first big assertion, this idea that hip-hop pushed anti-intellectual values, how does he show that from his own life? It sounds incredibly personal.
Oh, it is. He's very open about it. He talks about feeling this intense peer pressure, to consciously dumb down how he spoke, hiding his vocabulary, basically, even letting his grades slip, despite being capable. He actually details nearly failing academically because of this pressure.
Wow. And it wasn't just his feeling. He saw it in others, too.
That's right. He doesn't just leave it at his own story. He brings in anecdotes, stories about friends who kind of made the same choice, prioritizing street cred over academics. It really paints a picture of this conflict, this pull between fitting in and pursuing intellectual interests.
Okay, then there's the next major assertion, which, as you said, gets even more raw. Williams claims hip-hop glorified a destructive kind of masculinity and misogyny. How personal does he get with this one?
Extremely personal, and quite brave, I think. He confesses to physically assaulting his girlfriend when he was younger. And he directly links that act to absorbing what he calls hip-hop's pimpin' culture, this mindset that, treats women as objects, promotes transactional relationships.
That takes courage to admit. Does he only use his own experience here?
No, he widens the lens. He analyzes rap lyrics from that era, pointing out how they often promoted violence against women or these very exploitative views of sex. But what's also crucial is his description of moving away from that, his transformation. He credits literature, reading, intellectual engagement with helping him see differently.
So that exposure to books, to ideas, was his path out, essentially. Which leads to his third main point, doesn't it, about positive influences?
Exactly. His third big assertion is that books, and specifically strong intellectual father figures, can be a powerful counterweight to those negative cultural influences he experienced. And here, his own father is central. He talks about his dad's huge library, like number 15,000 books, and the intense intellectual discipline his father instilled.
15,000 books.
Right. And he argues this foundation was key to his success at Georgetown, his philosophical awakening. He draws this really stark contrast between his father's generation, focused on learning despite segregation, and what he saw as this rising anti-intellectualism among his peers.
Okay, so we've laid out his main arguments. Now let's try to get a handle on the kind of claims these are. We're talking opinion, fact, something deeper. We can look at this through what some call an epistemic lens, basically, trying to figure out how reliable the knowledge is. Opinion, knowledge, understanding, wisdom.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. And you see all those levels in the book. His personal experiences with hip-hop, they're powerful, they feel true for him, but they are fundamentally his opinion, his subjective testimony, characterizing the whole genre as negative based on that. That's his perspective, maybe not the whole story.
So vivid personal truth, but maybe not universal fact about the entire culture. Okay.
Right.
What about knowledge? Where are the verifiable facts?
Well, there's knowledge in the background information. The documented issues like educational underachievement in certain communities, those are social phenomena we can verify. And the facts about his own life, his academic record, his family background, those are things we can take as given knowledge points anchoring his story.
Right. And then understanding that's about connecting the dots, right? Seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. And Williams definitely demonstrates understanding. He brings in philosophy, Hegel, existentialism, and connects those big ideas to his lived experience, to identity, to culture. His analysis of how cultural messages shape identity, that shows real intellectual synthesis. He's not just listing things, he's explaining the relationships between them. That's understanding.
Okay. And the highest level, maybe wisdom. Does the book offer some enduring insight, some universal truth?
Well, the core message about, intellectual growth and being true to yourself over just conforming to the group, that definitely taps into traditional wisdom about how people flourish. But, and this may be where it gets complicated, his total rejection of hip-hop might lack that deeper wisdom that can see both the good and the bad in something complex. It's a powerful personal conclusion, but maybe not a fully rounded, wise take on the entire culture.
That makes sense. His personal journey has these undeniable insights, but maybe lacks that broader balance. This naturally leads us to think about the ethics of it all. Beyond his own story, what are the ethical dimensions here? How does his critique measure up against, say, the core principles we aim for as a society, like those in the preamble to the Constitution?
That's a really interesting angle. If you apply a kind of reciprocity test, like, would this critique be fair if applied to any culture? Well, scrutinizing cultural effects on youth seems fair in principle. But then you hit these potential ethical asymmetries, right? He's writing from a place of, eventually, having education and success. He's critiquing a culture that, for many without those resources, provides real identity and meaning. So the ethical question becomes, would he accept the same kind of sweeping critique of, say, academic culture from people who feel excluded by it? It's tricky.
That is a really important point. So thinking about those preamble goals.
Yeah.
How does his message stack up? Does it help form a more perfect union?
You could argue it does. He pushes for individual growth over strict group identity, which could foster unity based on shared human values, not just tribal ones. So maybe a score of, say, 7 out of 10 there. But for established justice, it's maybe a bit lower, like a 6. He definitely shows how cultural pressure can block opportunities, which is unjust. But does he fully tackle the systemic injustices that make hip-hop a source of identity in the first place? Maybe not enough.
Okay, what about keeping the peace, ensure domestic tranquility? His critique could stir things up, couldn't it?
It could, yeah. Attacking a major cultural identifier might cause friction, so maybe a 5 out of 10. But, on the other hand, his ultimate message is about peaceful intellectual growth over violence, so it cuts both ways. For promote the general welfare, though, it scores higher, maybe an 8. The focus on education, family, individual potential that clearly serves the public good. Critiquing self-destructive patterns helps communities.
And liberty. Secure the blessings of liberty.
That's another strong one, probably an 8. His whole argument is about choosing authentic selfhood over conforming to cultural dictates. That's a powerful defense of personal liberty. And his father's story is a great example of intellectual freedom leading to dignity.
So if we think about the golden rule, how does this land for different groups? Who feels helped? Who feels attacked?
Yeah, the impact varies wildly. Young people deep in the culture might feel, attacked, misunderstood, like their identity is being dismissed wholesale. Parents worried about those same cultural influences. They might feel validated, maybe even find some guidance. Educators pushing academics could feel supported. But hip-hop artists, advocates, they're definitely facing a direct challenge to their work and its meaning. It really depends on where you stand.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at the logic of his arguments. What holds up well under scrutiny, and where are the potential weak spots in his reasoning?
Well, a definite strength is how he uses concrete, personal stories to illustrate abstract ideas about culture. That makes it relatable, understandable. He also draws a pretty clear line in his own experience, showing how exposure to certain cultural elements seem to lead to specific behavioral changes. And using philosophy gives his arguments an intellectual backbone.
Makes sense. But arguments always have potential flaws. What are the logical weaknesses people might point out?
Several potential ones. First, maybe hasty generalization. Is he taking his specific personal story and applying it too broadly to all of hip-hop? The culture is huge and diverse. Then there's potentially a false dichotomy. He's sometimes presented as an either choice. It's either hip-hop or intellectual growth. Is there no room for both? Can they coexist?
Right, like it has to be one or the other.
Exactly. Also, possibly selection bias, he focuses heavily on the negative aspects he experienced. Does he give enough credit to positive elements, community building, artistic innovation, social critique within hip-hop? And finally, maybe a touch of post-hoc reasoning. Just because his struggles happened while he was immersed in hip-hop, does that definitively mean hip-hop caused them? Other factors, adolescence, environment, peers, play a role too, right?
Those are important, critical points to consider. And, as we grapple with these big ideas, sometimes it helps to just pause and reflect. That's why we really encourage you to check out Mindful Moments. It's our YouTube channel, and it offers AI book analysis, summaries, critiques, things designed to inspire that kind of reflection and rational thought.
A good place to let these complex ideas settle. So, thinking longer term now. Beyond the immediate debate, what are the potential ripple effects if Williams's perspective became more widespread? Socially, economically, even spiritually?
Socially, you can...
Well, emphasizing education definitely aligns with a modern knowledge-based economy. That's generally seen as positive for development. However, dismissing a major creative industry like hip-hop could mean undervaluing real economic contributions, jobs, cultural exports. It's not insignificant economically.
And what about the deeper, maybe spiritual side of things? His journey feels very much about finding meaning.
It really does. The book is a powerful testament to how literature, learning, thinking deeply, how those things can provide a sense of purpose, a path to authentic selfhood. It echoes classic journeys of intellectual and moral development, yet completely dismissing a culture that does provide a sense of meaning, community, even spiritual connection for millions, even if you see flaws in it, that raises questions about cultural wisdom, about embracing pluralism.
So when we put it all together, where do we land on Losing My Cool? What's the takeaway?
I think it's a brilliant piece of personal testimony. As a memoir, as a philosophical reflection on one person's intense journey, it's incredibly powerful and insightful. It shows the liberating power of ideas. But as a comprehensive cultural analysis of all hip-hop, it probably falls short. That wholesale rejection, while true to his experience, maybe lacks the nuance needed to grapple with such a complex living picture in its entirety.
Right. So to sum up the strengths, it's that compelling personal story, the power of education, the sharp critique of negative masculinity and anti-intellectualism, plus the smart way he leads in philosophy and that really moving portrait of his father as an intellectual mentor. It's inspiring in that way.
Definitely. But the weaknesses are also clear. Overgeneralizing from his own life, not really acknowledging the positive sides or diversity of hip-hop, maybe reflecting a bit of class bias and dismissing working-class culture, and perhaps just not capturing the full evolution and complexity of hip-hop over time.
That idea of mentorship, of finding intellectual guides, feels so relevant. And it really leaves us with some big questions, doesn't it? Questions for you, our listener, to mull over.
Absolutely. Like, how can communities hold on to the good parts of hip-hop culture while pushing back against the destructive elements? What's the right role for cultural criticism in shaping how young people see themselves? How do you balance that need for individual authenticity that Williams champions with the equally human need for belonging, for community? And maybe the biggest question, can hip-hop itself continue to evolve in ways that better support intellectual life and healthy relationships?
Lots to think about. If you want to explore these themes further, there were some great resources. To understand Williams's approach to ideas, Mortimer Adler's classic How to Read a Book is fantastic. For that historical context on Black intellectual traditions, you absolutely need W.E.B. Du Bois' The Souls of Black Folk.
And for other powerful perspectives on Black identity, James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son is essential. For a different take on love, masculinity, relationships, check out Bell Hook's All About Love. And if you want more nuanced, academic looks at hip-hop itself, scholars like Trisha Rose, Jeff Chang, Mark Anthony Neal, they offer really deep analyses.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a lot to chew on. Remember, for more insights and analyses like this, you can always find more at Mindful Moments and our podcasts. And for an even more in-depth book analysis of Losing My Whole, just click the link you see on screen. Please subscribe if you haven't. Share this with anyone you think might find it interesting, and you can find links to purchase the book there too. Above all, keep thinking rationally about these complex ideas. Until next time.